Hello, friends. Today we're going to talk a little bit about authenticity. There's such a power in being an authentic person. And for some of you, this is a training session for prison ministry. Others of you just popped on because you saw this video was downloaded. So whatever your reason is for being here, we're just going to talk a little bit about how authenticity affects relationship. This is something that I learned a couple years ago, just through a series of events, and I'll kind of share a little bit of my testimony. But what brought me to prison ministry was just somebody asking me to come along, and that was really great. But I remember the first time standing in front of a room full of inmates and thinking, what in the world am I doing here? What do I have to offer them? And here I am from a Christian home. I was raised in a wonderful family. I have two parents that love Jesus and love me and my siblings. And so, I was fairly protected from a lot of the outside things that would bring a person maybe to brokenness, or not even brokenness, but like I was protected from things like drugs and alcohol and other types of things that maybe would lead a person to wind up in prison. And so I just really didn't know, like, what am I gonna say? How am I gonna connect with these people? And I remember standing in front of them and with the microphone, and I was supposed to like introduce this class that we were teaching, and I was just so overwhelmed with my inadequacy. And I remember saying, Lord, what do I do? And hearing him, not audibly, but like just feeling his spirit say to me, just tell them where you are. And at that particular season, I was 6 months out from a very tragic time in my life. I lost somebody I loved and had taken care of for a year. And so I had walked through depression, a lot of darkness, a lot of things that I couldn't understand. I had never walked through before. And so I decided to be open and real with them. And I said, hey, this is where I am. And I just told them my story of walking through pain and heartache and depression. And I was just really open. Like, I never shared my story like that before. And it was like 6 months to the day of when I lost this person that I was standing in prison and telling the story. And at the end of sharing that, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. There were over 100 women, inmates, and they connected with this pain that I was telling them I had. And it just was it was just like a light bulb went off in my head. I just felt the Spirit say, your brokenness is what connects you to these women. And isn't that what connects us as humans? Like, learning that we're not walking through things by ourselves. Like, there's other people in the world that have walked through similar experiences. Now, obviously, they're not going to be the same, but similar experiences. And that was just a really powerful moment for me to realize that not only was my pain had a purpose, but it actually was going to be the modem to which God connected me to women that I was ministering to. And that was just such an amazing revelation, because it's very easy for us, I think, in our Christian culture to want to hide our pain or hide our inadequacies, hide the things that we're walking through. In reality, those are the very things that God wants to use in our lives in a really powerful way. And so being authentic, being yourself, being real is super important in your everyday life. If you minister in prison, it's going to be really important for you there. Because if there's two types of people that can spot a fake a mile away, it's an inmate and a teenager. They're just really good at noticing whether or not you're going to be authentic, and they value authenticity. I think sometimes our fear, I remember one time teaching a session on authenticity, or talking with somebody, I can't remember which it was, and this young lady came up to me, a friend, afterwards, and she said, I just got to ask you, like, how safe is it to be authentic in the context of prison? And that was a really good question. I have come back to that so many times. It's really helped me understand myself and humans in general. We shy away from being authentic because we're afraid of what somebody will think of us. We're afraid of being known when we can't control it. So I think there's such a huge importance in our culture right now to appear a certain way. If you're anywhere on social media, you're going to know that the friends that you know closest to you, you know their lives aren't like that in real life, like what they're posting, the pictures they're posting. Instagram, I'm on Instagram, and it's just always interesting to me to know the lives of people and then to see what they post. And it's not always authentic. Sometimes it's what they want you to know about them, what they want you to think about them. They want you to know that their lives are perfect and their kids are perfect and they do everything homemade, or they whatever is important to them, or the people group that they're trying to identify with. That's what they're going to post so that it looks like that's who they are. And I'm not downing social media. I have some myself. I just think we need to strive to be real, to be authentic, to be who we really are. And I'm not saying air all your dirty laundry on this social media, but this is a rule that I keep for myself, is like, whatever I do post needs to be 100% real. So I don't want to put up a fake, a mask of who I really am. I've went through some tough times over the last 6 months. I didn't post about that. I didn't have to. There's times that when I post, I try to be positive, because there's a lot of negativity that you could take from some of the things that I walk through, but just be positive. Okay, I love being a mom now. I love my little guy. I love my husband and the way that he's taking care of me. And so those are honest, true things that I can say. I don't have to use a bunch of filters and make my house look a certain way or whatever. Like this background behind me, this is not my house, so isn't it pretty? But yeah, it's so pervasive in our culture, I think, to put up a facade of perfectionism, and that is something that is not going to serve you well in life at all, but most definitely in prison. That's not going to serve you well. I have walked into prison with a group of volunteers, and I've noticed that inmates shy away from certain ones and they gravitate to others. And usually it's authenticity. And it's not something you can conjure up. It's something that has to start in your heart, of realizing that you need to be open and real and authentic with people. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between vulnerability and transparency. And this is important in a prison setting, and also just learning who's safe and who's not safe. We don't want you, if you're a volunteer in prison, we don't want you to ever feel like you've shared too much that you're actually unsafe. That's obviously not our goal. Our goal is that everybody that goes in will be 100% themselves. They won't be fake. They don't pretend to be somebody you're not. To pretend that you have all the answers, that you're all put together. Those are things that we know as humans. None of us have. We aren't, none of us are perfect. None of us have all the answers. None of us are all put together. And yet sometimes we start around like we are. And that is something that's, again, not going to serve you well in prison. I think there's a difference between transparency and vulnerability. Transparency, from what I've learned, is being real and telling the truth about your past. So you can be transparent about things that you're not walking through right now. You can be very honest, like say, your story in the past has been very broken. Maybe it included drugs or alcohol or prison or whatever. And you can be very transparent about those things that are in the past. And that's awesome. Those are really great stories. Those are, I have some stories myself that I can be transparent about because they're in the past. Vulnerability, in my, the way that I understand it, is being real about where I am right now. And that's where it gets a little harder for us, because when we're walking in something, it's hard to be real. It's hard to be authentic. Because when we're real and transparent about things in the past, it's done. It's over. People aren't going to maybe analyze that as much as they will what you're going through right now. And I know this from experience, like, and I won't go through all the details. If you want to watch more of my actual story with my my recent birth with my son and some of the things that happened after that, if you're a lady and you want to watch that story is on my YouTube channel in more depth. And that's was just a really broken time in my life, because physically I just couldn't do what I wanted to do and enjoy being a mom those first couple months. But one thing I noticed during that period of time is, because I want to be authentic, I want to be my real self, I want to be vulnerable with the people that I love. And there were some times that when I would be authentic and vulnerable with someone, they would analyze the situation and like give me, 10 reasons that I could have avoided that, or kind of tell me how it was my fault that these things happened, or really just what you need in those moments is compassion and prayer and somebody to be present with you. You don't necessarily need to be fixed, because these things that had happened in my life I didn't have control over. And yet there were people who would kind of, I know they were well-meaning, but it felt like they were just adding salt to these wounds. And so that is the hard part about vulnerability, is that there will be risk involved as we are vulnerable and open and real with people, especially in the moment, in our brokenness. There will be those that you discover aren't safe to share with, and that will hurt. That will hurt to have people minimize your pain or try to put blame on you, when you really just need someone to love you and to sit with you and to pray for you. And so there is risk involved in being vulnerable. It is not safe. To answer my friend's question, vulnerability is just not safe. There's nothing safe about it. But it is needful. If we're going to have deep, lasting friendship, if we're going to have a real mark in the world, we have to be real. We have to be vulnerable with people. It's important. It's the glue that ties us together. But one thing I will say is that in prison, that is, being vulnerable has never been something I regretted. in the free world, so to speak, that's when I've gotten hurt by being vulnerable. But in prison, I've never walked away from being vulnerable and open with someone or with a group and thought, wow, I wish I wouldn't have told that story. Quite the reverse. And I think it's because broken people realize that brokenness is part of human nature. Like, we are going to be broken. We are going to not have the answers. We are going to need help in some time in our life. And so in prison, I think you'll find that vulnerability and authenticity, being transparent, those are things that are so valued there that you won't walk away saying, wow, I feel like I was, cornered, or I was told that it shouldn't be that way, or I shouldn't feel this way. I think you're going to find understanding, and you're going to find people that have a compassion, and their hearts are knit to yours because they understand pain. I remember one time in particular, I've told my story a lot, different parts of my story, and the broken pieces are the ones I usually share, just because I want to establish, like, hey, I'm not here to give you all the answers because I'm better than you, but I'm here to learn with you. I'm here to sit at the feet of Jesus with you for 4 days, and I'm here to see what the Lord has to say for us and with us and to us. And so I've shared my story, and never have I shared my story when not at least one person, usually 2 or 3, but at least one person will come up to me with tears and say, I totally identify with your story. And instead of turning to Jesus, I turned to drugs and alcohol. And that's why I'm here. And so it helps me understand, like, I could be there. I could literally be in that same position if it wasn't for the grace of God helping me turn to Jesus versus other substances or addictions. And so it continually helps me remember the grace of God on my life. But I remember one time in particular, I had waited till like the 3rd or 4th day to share any part of my testimony. For whatever reason, I usually wait until I feel like the Spirit is saying, okay, now's the time to share. And so the Lord hadn't given me freedom to share yet. So the 3rd or 4th day, I got up and I shared, and I cried, and I told about my battle with depression in 2017, and just what the Lord had done in my life, and how He is hope, and His name is Jesus. Like, we have hope in Jesus. And I just share that part of my story. And later, a lady came up to me, an inmate, and she said, for days I've been sitting here watching you lead this seminar, facilitate, and she said, I kept thinking, what in the world do you have to offer us? Because you came from a Christian family, and you were homeschooled, and you were protected, and you haven't done any things that we've done. And so what could you possibly offer me? And I'm like, you're feeling a little like, backed in the corner. But then her face relaxed, and she's like, but then you told your story. And I realized that pain is pain. And your pain is different than our pain, but it's still pain. And I now see that there are things that you have to offer because you're human, and because you cared enough to come to us. And I just was like, wow, how, if I wouldn't have told that part of my story, I would have walked away, and she would have still had that thought in her mind, like, they have nothing to offer us because, they have perfect lives. And yet, when I shared that brokenness, it connected us. And she realized, like, wow, she's real. and she has problems, and yet she's still coming to Jesus. So I think that's really important. I love the quote by Dr. Tim Keller that says, it's, let me look it up because I don't want to mess it up here. It's, oh goodness, I thought I had it written down. Let me come back to that. So perfectionism, I think, is a brokenness all on its own. We need to be careful not to try to appear as something that we're not. I think we as Christians can be like the best in the world at hiding the true us. And I think it's a fear of people not wanting to buy the Jesus we're selling. And the reality is we don't have to sell him. Like, he stands alone. He can stand for himself. And yet we think that if we show who we really are and people know we're Christians, then that will make him less, like Jesus, less desirable. But in reality, it's not how it works. We should be the most broken people. We should be the people that most realize our need for Jesus. Instead of coming up with this facade of pride as if we don't need him. So lack of humility is huge. Like, we need to realize that God's grace on us has brought us to this point. And God doesn't want our perfection. He wants our humble hearts. He really does. And this is something I share all the time with women, anywhere I go, really. Just talking about how the parts of our stories that we'd like to like rip out of our books, you know, like our life books, those are the pages that God most uses for his glory, if we allow him to. And so those pieces of your life that seem a little bit busted up, that you're embarrassed of, that you would rather not anybody knew about, those are probably the pages that God most wants to use for his glory, because it's connective. Again, my story is not like yours, but I'm sure that you've had pain just like I've had pain in different ways. So I think just that vulnerable connection in prison is super, super important. Like, what if the broken pieces of our story are being woven in a way that will showcase the gospel and bring somebody to Jesus? Like, wouldn't it be worth it to share that vulnerability and to just be open with people? And the quote just came back to me. Dr. Tim Keller says, it's helplessness, not holiness, that is the first step to accessing God. I'll say that again. It's helplessness, not holiness, that is the first step to accessing God. And that's what I want for myself. I want to be so open and broken and helpless before the Lord that when I walk into prison or I walk into somewhere else to share, or just I'm like talking with somebody one-on-one, I realize my own inadequacies, and I remember that being authentic and real, that's the first step. Like, we need that. We need that as humans in order to connect with other people. And so I just want to encourage you with that, whether you're volunteering in prison or you maybe have a Bible study at home, and so it's nothing to do with prison, but you minister to women in a different way, or you have a friend that you're trying to connect with. I just gotta say that, like, if you want deep, lasting friendships, you have to go here. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be real. You have to be transparent and authentic, because we can't go deep if we aren't real, because it's just surface stuff. And so it's very important. I think this is so key when you're ministering to people who don't have stories like yours, who do maybe include jail or or drugs or alcohol or other substance things abuse. The reality is we all need Jesus equally as much. It doesn't matter if you came from a Christian home and were homeschooled, or you had a life that was completely opposite that. We all need Jesus. It levels the playing field. Like, every single one of us are worthless without him. And so just encouraging you with that, to be real, be who you really are, who God has called you to be. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't have all the answers, that you're seeking Jesus like they are. Be willing to share parts of your story that aren't pretty, so to speak, and they're not put together. I'm just realizing I've learned so much, like, that actually telling those parts of my story that are so painful, that's actually part of my healing, is because then this very painful thing becomes a beautiful thing because it's used for God's glory. So I just want to encourage you with that, to use those parts of your story that you feel like are less beautiful, and remember that God can use them as healing in your life, but also as connective tissue between you and other believers. So thank you for listening, and may the Lord bless you.